Hi, today we are in Palo Alto in the ThoughtSpot office. Hi Ajeet, who are
Hi,
you
Martin.
and what do you do?
Yeah, my name is Ajeet Singh, and I'm co-founder and CEO of ThoughtSpot. We started this company in 2012. I've been in the Valley for about 7 years, actually 8 years now. I came here in 2007 to join Oracle. I worked for a startup, and then I started a company called Nutanix in 2009, and I started ThoughtSpot in 2012.
Great. How did you come up with the business idea of ThoughtSpot?
Yeah, so the business idea of ThoughtSpot was primarily, I would say, driven by the experience I had at Oracle, and then the first startup where I worked called Astra Data Systems. That was in 2007, 2008. And I saw that the data infrastructure was becoming very scalable. We call it big data now. Right? People were coming up with more scalable model of storing lots and lots of data in a cost-efficient way. But how this data was delivered to the end users, that was not changing. That was still done using the traditional reporting model. And that's very painful because it requires a lot of work. You need experts, you need technical experts to actually build reports for business users. And it's a very slow and inefficient process. And that's where we saw the opportunity. We saw that in the consumer space, there's 2 billion people using search as a way to find information. And we thought, what if we could actually provide that user experience for numbers? What if a marketing manager could go to a simple search bar and ask for revenue in a particular quarter for a particular campaign they might have done, or a product line, or whatever they might be interested in, and just get the answers on the fly without actually having to go to somebody to say, hey, can you build me a report? And going back and forth on what the report should be like, and changing it becomes very painful, and those kinds of things. So we saw there being a huge difference in how people were accessing information at home through Google and Facebook and LinkedIn, and at work, which is through traditional business intelligence reporting technologies. And that's the gap we are trying to fill.
Great. Ajeet, how did you start about it? How long did it take for you to build the first iteration of the product? When did you raise money? When did you talk to the first customers?
Yeah, so I would say we talked to first prospects even before we started the company, right? So early 2012, we spent time just learning the market, right? We realized that this is a big market and there is a big problem in that, right? So my way of thinking about startup has been driven more by markets. Picking the right market first is personally for me has been the most important thing. The idea actually comes later. What is the market and what is the problem that we can solve? Now there can be various ways of solving it, but before I get down to identifying how exactly we want to solve the problem, I want to spend time with customers. I want to look at competition. I want to look at partners. I want to understand how we might sell a product there, how people buy that, people buy products in those markets and things like that. So we spent about 6 months just studying the market and talking to prospects, talking to partners, talking to people who sell to these companies, just learning. And once we figured that out, then we learned about the problem, obviously. And then we went to the whiteboard and we said, what would be the most awesome way of solving this problem, right? The most simple way, because technology has become very complex, right? So, and a lot of innovation now is just bringing simplicity to complex ways of doing things, because complexity means you are going to be slow and it's going to be very expensive to do things. If you make them simple, a lot of people can do those tasks, and they can do it more efficiently, they can do it easily. So we came up with this idea that if you apply search to analytics, it can actually be a 10x to 100x difference in how people operate today. And then we started defining the product, defining the architecture of the product, and spent about 6 months, I would say, designing the product. When I say design, I'm talking more about the technical design and some part of UI design. Because what we are building, it's very UX driven. but in the back end there is a lot of complexity that we had to deal with. So it was important to make sure that that core platform is architected well, so that when we go to market, we don't have to go and iterate on that.
At what point in time did you think about talking to investors?
So this being my second startup, I already had some existing relationships with some investors. As I said, my previous company I started in 2009, and that company has actually done really well. So in the process, I had an opportunity to work with Lightspeed Ventures and Khosla Ventures, and both of them are great investors, great people. And for me, it's always been about people, because the kinds of things we do, for some people it might look crazy. The only thing that is guaranteed is the experience of working with awesome people. So it was basically working with the same set of folks, making sure that we are going after a market and a problem that is highly valuable. We spent time on that, but raising money itself was, I would say, not the biggest challenge that we had to overcome.
Okay. Ajeet, let's talk about the business model of ThoughtSpot. So what are basically the customers that you are targeting, and especially, I guess, in terms of the functions that are maybe more adaptive to your solutions? And exactly what is the value proposition besides being only simpler to getting access to data and analytics that you're delivering to those customers?
Right. We currently are, I would say, focused on mid to large enterprises, Global 2000, if you will. Is the way I would characterize our market segment. And within these, we are building a solution that is designed for business functions, sales, marketing, operations, supply chain, finance, and so forth. But what we are building is very scalable, right? So we can go to a large company, let's say, one of the largest retailers, and potentially they might have 50,000 people that would want to use ThoughtSpot, right? So this is a solution that can start small, say with a few hundred people, and then over time you can scale to thousands and thousands of people. So we do also get involved with IT departments. So typically, I would say a director or a VP of business intelligence would be someone that we will talk to. Then we will involve somebody from the business side. And the value proposition for them is, imagine you are talking to a marketing person, right, a head of marketing, whose primary responsibility is to reduce customer churn. Then they have currently an existing way of looking at data for how the churn numbers are over time and how different campaigns might be having an effect on churn. We would go in and demonstrate to them that with our technology, they can get access to their churn data in a much more granular, much more ad hoc way. Because they're launching campaigns, and this is actually a real example, and previously it would take them 2 to 3 months to find out what the effect of a campaign was on their churn numbers. Now they can do that in a few minutes. So I launch a campaign, and next day, as soon as the data starts to come in, I can go in and understand how my churn numbers are changing by geography, by product line, and those kinds of things. And then based on that, I can then optimize which campaigns I do more, which campaigns should I do less, and things like that. And we now have customers that are across almost all major industry verticals: retail, financial services, telecom, manufacturing, and so on. So we work with a whole range of people.
Okay. I mean, from my point of view, the major benefit of ThoughtSpot is that you're making it super easy and accessible for people to access the data in a core company. How does a customer of you ingest the data into ThoughtSpot, and how do you set specific user rights to data? Because maybe only the C-level management would like to have access to financials, and some other people should not, and so on.
Right. So we are doing to enterprise data what Google did to newspapers, right? Long time ago, people used to get information through newspapers, and it was published by a few people, and it was well formatted. There's the headlines, and there's a front page and sports page and so on. It was very rigid in structure because only a few people could publish the newspaper. That was the model, right? But with Google, now anybody can go in and find the information they want or the news they want and things like that. Now, when we apply the same model to enterprise, the user experience model remains the same, but a lot of other things change, right? The kinds of things that changed, I would say, number one is the type of data we are going after. Right? Google and most other search engines that are out there, they are, the data they're ingesting are documents, they're web pages or images or videos and things like that. What we are going after is, we are connecting to the most valuable data assets in largest of large companies, right? So that data sits in their ERP systems or data warehouses or any kind of databases, or now we have Hadoop and data lakes, and it's a very complicated environment. So the type of data we have to deal with is very, very complicated. So we had to build new kind of search technology that can understand all the complexities that are there in databases, like tables and joins and columns, cardinalities and things like that. That was done from scratch. Now, when you use search to analyze this data, the performance expectations also completely change. Because in a traditional reporting environment, if your report comes back in 20-30 seconds, that's considered fast, right? But if you're in a search bar, the user expectations are very different. So our search engine is backed by a very high performance computational engine that can take data from hundreds of tables and billions of rows and do joins on the fly and give results to end users at search speed. The third big change is security, as you said. People want to cordon off data across departments, across different levels, and things of that nature, right? And last but not the least, I would say the biggest way in which we differ from a classic search engine is accuracy and trustworthiness of the data. Because if I am looking for friends on Facebook, or I'm looking for books on Amazon, or I'm looking for coffee shops on Google, I'll get probably 10, 20, 30 results, right, for any given search, and I'll have to pick which of them is relevant for me, right? There's no guarantee that the search engine is going to give me one answer which I'm interested in. But if I'm giving ThoughtSpot in the hands of, say, 100 marketing analysts or 100 financial analysts, or thousands of people in an organization that might be doing very specific functions, they are used to getting data from reports or Excel sheets, or they're number-driven people, right? And they will not accept guesswork, right? So we had to build a search technology that does not do any guesswork. It actually uses intelligence that is already there in their data, and uses that combined with the inputs that are coming from the user through the search bar, and always gives them one single result, right? So even though on the front end we look very, very simple, in the back end we had to handle scale, we had to handle complexity of data, and we had to handle security and governance. And the nice thing is that when we go to our customers with ThoughtSpot, the business users are happy because all of them can now access data on the fly whenever they want it. The IT department is also happy because today the IT department is buried under a long list of report requests, and they're always behind. Some of them have told us they feel like report monkeys. I'm just building more and more reports, right? As opposed to going to the business and saying, what other kind of data can I give you so that you can make better business decisions? So with ThoughtSpot, IT can be in the business of finding new data sources, provisioning new data sources, and putting security and governance around them, and business users can access the data that they're supposed to access.
Ajeet, how did you acquire the first 1 or 2 customers, and how did you convince them, guys, please give me access to the most precious data that you have, and I'll give you some kind of answers to that?
In the Valley and elsewhere as well, there is this model of working with your investors to get access to initial customers. We also do that. Our investors are extremely helpful in making introductions to potential customers. But at least for me, the way we like to build the company is it has to be done in an organic way. And what I mean by that is we have to find a natural fit between what we are building and the segment of market that would be interested in, right? When I'm going through the process of defining and building the product, the exact specific market segment is kind of nebulous, right? It's not that well known. And also how I pitch the product to them and how they will use and what features are important versus not, that also is, it's not known, right? So you go through this process of finding the product market fit. And the product market fit, it's better if it is done organically by the company itself, where you might have, so we, I would say about 18 months before we had a GA product, we had an inside salesperson who was reaching out to people and calling them and doing demos. About a year before having a GA product, we had a full sales team.
Wow.
And these are expensive, sales teams. You can spend anywhere from $500,000 to $1 million every year on a sales team. But for the kinds of things we are doing, it typically takes about 12 months to figure out what exactly is the product market fit. Is my product good for small companies? Is it good for big companies? If it is good for big companies, who are the people that I need to talk to? Who will be involved in the buying process? And what will they look for? What features are important? So all this has to be discovered in the field organically. If you just depend on your own network, which is friends and family, or you depend on investors, then you will go to people who will try your product because there was an introduction that was made, or they are your friend. And that might give you either false positive, because they might say, hey, this is awesome, this is great, I love it, right? You don't know if they're saying that because they love you or they love the product. They can also be false negative, because maybe they're not the right users for the kind of product you are building. The right user is somewhere else. Right? So I think it has to be a good mix of reaching out through the network as well as organic outreach. With a bias, I have a personal bias towards organic outreach. And in our case, that's what we did. We reached out to people organically. We showed them the product. We got their feedback, and wherever we found the best fit, we went after those. And since we are building an enterprise product, and the data is very sensitive, that's what you're hinting at. It's an on-premise product, so we actually go and deploy our product inside the firewalls of a customer, so that they don't have to worry about data security and those kinds of things.
And did you provide, I don't know, the first customers just some free trials, so for showing the value, and then after you've shown the value, then say, okay, let's put some revenue numbers behind it, or did you start in the beginning always, I would like to put some $sign on that?
Yeah, even our betas were paid. Our first betas were also paid. We didn't want to give our product out for free, even for trial. Because it leads to the same situation I was talking about earlier. You end up with people that just want to kick the tires, either because they have fun kicking tires, playing with new technology, or they're taking it because they're doing a favor to you or to your investors. But if you ask for even $1, asking for $1 is so much more valuable than giving your product away for free. So the goal there is not to make money and fund your business. The goal is to make sure that the problem you're trying to solve, right, is a real problem, right? So if I go to a business and it's, let's say, an accounting firm that wants to understand how should I grow my business and which of my customers are the most profitable for me, that has to be a real problem, so that I know if the product actually works. There's the product promise that has to match with the business problem, and then value can get created. So it's very important to make sure that you're going after real problems and not just trying to get lucky or have some good accidents along the way and eventually get to success that way.
Ajeet, let's talk about the technology of ThoughtSpot. If I'm a potential client and I'm signing up to ThoughtSpot, how does it work then? So how is your machine learning for that, okay, if a human enters this kind of data, this means this kind of query, which is based on this kind of data for the first queries?
Yep. The way we thought about building the product was we want to make it simple on the front end for the end users, but we also want to make it simple on the back end for IT to set it up. Because traditional products, they're very clunky for the business users, the end users. We call them humans, right? So we like to call ourselves as analytics for humans. Average human beings who might be experts in sales, marketing, etc., but not in analytics, should be able to access data. That's the idea there. You want to make it simple for those humans on the front end, but on the back end also, today there is a lot of work that is done to set up BI products, right? You have to connect to data sources, obviously, and then you have to talk to the business users and say, which reports do you want, right? And for those reports, I have to identify where the data is going to come from, what kind of data model am I going to need. If the queries are going to run very slow, I might have to build what are known as cubes, OLAP cubes, which is basically pre-aggregation, right? I would do those computations overnight, so next morning you can look at your revenue for each country, right? But if you wanted to look at revenue by each product line, oops, I didn't do that, right? That's the problem with that. And so you have to define all these things in advance. With ThoughtSpot, we leverage a lot of in-memory computing at scale, and we have cut down on any sort of pre-computation that is required. And every step we try to make things simple and cut down on any human intervention that might be required. So what we do is we would go to, let's say you're signing up with ThoughtSpot, we would implement our product, install our product in your data center, and that's typically done within a day, right? And we will get you live within 2 to 4 weeks from day zero. And that's just to give you a sense, a typical classic BI deployment takes about 6 months. So we have shrunk that time of 6 months down to 2 to 4 weeks for some of the biggest and most complicated data sets that are out there. And the way we do this is we connect to data sources, and we then build sort of a mirror image of the schema of these data sources. And then our search engine, as I was saying earlier, has been built to understand all kinds of things that are in that schema. It understands all the tables and joins and a lot of metadata that is already present. We do, a lot of times customers say that my data is dirty, not going to be ready for this, and which is all data in the world is dirty, so our system assumes that data is going to be dirty and is tolerant to dirty data. But we do so we don't expect you to sort of massage it in a certain way or create a particular very specific kind of schema and set it up nicely. If you want to sort of apply a cleaning filter on top of your data, so you might get very dirty data, and then we allow you to put a very simple filter, which is a matter of an hour. You can define that and then expose that to your end users. And we will basically go through that filter so that all the dirtiness is filtered out, and we are presenting clean results to the end users. So it's the technology that we have built, the search engine, that leverages all the investments you have made in your data sources already to cut down that time. And we don't have to go through a long process of defining any kind of natural language models or any machine learning models and then test them, verify them, and over time we get better. That's not the model. On day one we are good, over time we become great.
Great. Ajit, how did you come up with the revenue model, and what is actually driving the pricing? So is it more like storage or computational power or the number of users or just company size revenue? What is driving it?
Yeah, it's a great question because if you look at the pricing model that exists in the market today, it's a per user model, right? So if you're a customer, you're signing up, I would ask you, how many users do you think you will have? And you'd say 100, and I'll try to sell you license for 200, right? You'll say, no, give me 150. Let's start with 150 and we'll see over time where we end. And then the IT department says, hey, we got 150 licenses for this. So first of all, since the technology is complex, a lot of those licenses go waste. And if more people want access to information, let's say you wanted to roll it out to a new department, which has 1,000 people, then you need to go back to the vendor and again ask them for spend more money with them. The whole idea behind ThoughtSpot is adoption of data. Because today only 22% people can access data. We want to increase that number significantly. And for each of those people, we want them to be able to access data very, very frequently, right? So we're talking about 10x to 100x increase in adoption of data. So we don't want to penalize our customers on number of users. We do not charge by number of users. Even our smallest product SKU that we will sell to you, you can put unlimited number of users on that, right? How we price our product is we sell an appliance today, and it's a building block model. It's a Lego block model, right? So you can rack and stack them as much as you need to scale. You can start small and grow over time, but we do not have any limit on number of users for these appliances.
But is this then query-based or data storage?
It's based on appliance, so which can take a finite amount of data.
Let's talk about your advice to first-time entrepreneurs. So this is your second company. What have you learned along the way where you said, wow, this was a major learning for me going forward and I will never forget this lesson?
Yeah, so there is lots of them, right? As if you talk to anybody who's been at a startup in any capacity, it's the best place to learn, right? So my number one advice is to find amazing startups and spend some time there, either in a founding capacity or as an employee. Because if you are someone who's driven by a passion for creation, which is most of people are, at least here in the Valley, and many other places in the world where there's large technical talent. So then working at a startup gives you that opportunity to have a much open playing field where you can have your ideas come to life very, very quickly. If you're starting as an entrepreneur, I like to not be very prescriptive about these things because every situation is very, very different. But for me, I think what is important is understanding the risk model you're opting into, either directly or indirectly, right? And I like to look at risks in two dimensions, market risk and execution risk. Is there going to be a market for my product, right? The idea that I have, and that's market risk. And if I actually I'm successful, then is it going to be valuable? That's how I look at market risk. I also look at, is there history of companies that have become successful in this market? And if I see a market that has 10 to 20 billion plus dollar companies built in the last 10-15 years, that tells me that this market is large and it supports building large independent companies. Right? On the execution side, it's can I actually build the product that I'm talking about and sell it? That's execution risk. So I personally like to go after opportunities that are very low in market risk and very high in execution risk, because I don't want to spend several years of my time and some other people's time and find that there is no market for my product. But we want execution risk to be high because you want to set a high bar for anybody else to be able to copy what you're doing. Right? So that's one model. I'm not saying that should be the only model. And there is a way of building companies that fall in this bucket. There's another sort of model which is high market risk and low execution risk, at least to begin with, right? Where I don't know if there is a market. Right? If you think about Uber or something else, actually, well, it's questionable whether market risk for Uber was low or high. But a lot of consumer startups would come in that bucket. But what you have to focus on is mitigating market risk before you do too much execution. So understand the risk profile you're opting into, and focus on that part first. If your execution risk is high, then mitigate execution risk by thinking through the product you're going to build, thinking through how you will sell it, thinking through the architecture of the product before you start coding. If your market risk is very high, get the hell out of your office and go out and understand what the market is like and prototype and test. All the lean startup stuff, right, would come in that category, I would say.
And assume you will have checked the market risk is low. And now the question is, if you're checking on the execution risk, how do you identify whether your potential solution will be like 10x or 100x better than existing solutions?
I think some of that comes, people call that vision. It's like, what you think of, you understand the market and you understand the problem. Now, as I was saying earlier in the interview, the way I like to think of the idea is to what is the most awesome way of solving that problem, like the most ideal way. If I had infinite money, infinite number of people, everything, what is the most ideal way of solving this problem, right? And then go from there. Right? Then you need to make it viable and fix the execution risk over time, as I was saying. So I would say in the beginning, it has to be driven by your own vision and passion and gut. There is no sort of science to it. right? There's a big part of building a company which is making gut calls.
Cool. Ajeet, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you so much for having me.
Great. And if you have a company and you don't know whether your business people are really checking all the data and getting most out of it, check out ThoughtSpot. Thanks.